Welcome back to Apex Truth. We often associate man-eaters with the regal power of the tiger or the stealth of the leopard. We respect them, we fear them, but there is a creature in the Indian wilderness that evokes a different kind of fear, a fear that is dirty, ancient, and repulsive. It is the scavenger, the grave robber, the hyena. Usually, the striped hyena is a coward. It skulks in the shadows, waiting for leftovers, running from the smallest village dog. But history tells us that sometimes nature breaks its own rules. Sometimes a scavenger realizes that it doesn't have to wait for the dead. It can create them. In the late 1880s, in the dry, rocky badlands of the Deccan Plateau in India, a monster emerged that made the beast of Gévaudan look like a fairy tale. This was not a wolf. This was a creature with jaws strong enough to crush the femur of a buffalo, a creature that didn't roar, but laughed as it hunted. This is the story of the Laughing Devil. The year was 1884. The village of Demoux sat on the edge of a jagged ravine system, a place of thorns, dust, and ancient ruins. The trouble began not with a death, but with a disappearance. A 3-year-old girl named Anjali was sleeping on a cot next to her mother in the courtyard. It was a hot summer night, and the family slept outside for the breeze. The moon was full, casting long, twisted shadows across the dusty ground. Around 2 a.m., the mother woke up. She didn't know why. There was no noise, no scream. She just felt a sudden, freezing emptiness beside her. She reached out her hand to touch her daughter, but she felt only the rough weave of the cot. She sat up, confused. "Anjali?" she whispered. Silence. Then she heard it. From the darkness beyond the courtyard wall, about 50 yards away in the scrubland, a sound that froze her blood. It was a low, rhythmic crunching sound. Crack, snap, grind, like a heavy stone pestle grinding spices. She grabbed a lantern and ran to the wall, raising the light. The beam cut through the dark, and for a split second it illuminated a pair of eyes. Not the burning gold of a tiger, but a dull, pale yellow. The eyes were set in a massive, sloping head that was turning away, dragging a small, limp bundle into the thorns. The mother screamed. It was a scream that woke the entire village, but by the time the men arrived with torches, the eyes were gone. The bundle was gone. All that remained in the dust were strange, uneven pug marks. The front paws massive, the back legs short and twisted. And floating on the wind, coming from the deep ravine, was a sound that made the bravest men drop their weapons. A high-pitched, maniacal cackle. Hee-hee-hee-hee-hee. The beast was laughing. The next morning, the sun rose over a village that had changed forever. The men of Demoux, armed with axes and old muskets, followed the drag marks into the ravine. They expected to find a body. They expected to find something to cremate. But they forgot what kind of monster they were dealing with. A tiger leaves a carcass. A leopard leaves leftovers. A hyena leaves nothing. They found the spot where the beast had fed, marked only by a patch of disturbed earth and a few splintered fragments of bone no bigger than a coin. The child was simply erased. This horror of this realization broke the spirit of the village. There was no body to mourn, no ashes to scatter in the river. It was as if she had never existed. This specific horror, the total consumption of the victim, is what sets the hyena apart from all other man-eaters. It doesn't just kill you, it recycles you into the dust. Over the next 6 weeks, the terror spread like a plague. This was not a random animal attack, it was a systematic purge. The Laughing Devil struck villages in a 20-mile radius. It didn't care about fire, it didn't care about walls. It had a terrifying intelligence. It seemed to know which huts had weak doors and which families slept heavy. The death toll rose to 12, then 20, and they were all children. The beast was targeting the future of the villages. The panic turned into hysteria. Just like the beast of Gévaudan in France, the locals began to believe this was no natural animal. They whispered that it was a Rakshasa, or a were-hyena, a sorcerer who draped the skin of a beast over his shoulders at night to satisfy a bloodlust. They claimed that arrows bounced off its hide and that it could stand on its hind legs to look into windows. The British district officers dismissed these as peasant superstitions. They said, "It's just a dog, a dirty scavenging dog. I will shoot it and feed it to the vultures by tomorrow noon." He brought with him a heavy 5.77 express rifle, a weapon designed to stop charging elephants. He was bringing a cannon to a knife fight. Burton set his trap with military precision. He knew hyenas were driven by greed. He tied a young goat in the center of the ravine path, the beast's known highway. He built a machan in a chaotic tangle of babul trees, carefully masking his scent with cow dung and ash. He sat there as the sun went down, confident, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. The night was agonizingly slow. The goat bleated continuously, its cries echoing off the canyon walls. Hours passed. Then, around midnight, the jungle went dead silent. The insects stopped buzzing. Burton tensed. He heard the soft crunch of pads on the gravel. He raised his heavy rifle, peering through the moonlight. He saw a shadow detach itself from the black rocks. It was the beast. The hyena stepped into the patch of moonlight. Burton gasped. The descriptions were true. It was enormous, standing nearly 3 feet at the shoulder, with a neck as thick as a bull's. But then something chilling happened. The hyena didn't look at the grieving goat. It stopped 20 yards away. It lifted its massive snout and sniffed the air, rotating its ears like radar dishes. Then it looked up. It looked directly at the tree where Burton was hiding. It knew. The intelligence in those pale yellow eyes was terrifying. It didn't growl, it didn't charge. It simply stared at the hunter for a long, uncomfortable minute, as if memorizing his face. Then it turned around and walked away, vanishing into the darkness like smoke. Burton was baffled. He kept his gun raised, expecting it to circle back for the goat. But the horror hadn't started yet. 20 minutes later, while Burton was still sitting in his tree, a scream erupted, not from the ravine, but from the village behind him, the very village he was supposed to be protecting. The laughing devil had used the goat as a distraction. It had realized the hunter was watching the path, so it had flanked him. While Burton was watching the bait, the monster had circled around to get to the real prey. Burton scrambled down the tree, cursing, and ran towards the screams, stumbling in the dark. He arrived at a hut on the edge of the settlement to find a broken door and a weeping mother clutching a torn blanket. The laughing devil had taken another child, right under the nose of the best hunter in the province. The message was clear. You do not hunt me. I hunt you. The failure of Captain Burton sent shockwaves through the district. The man who had faced tigers without flinching was now visibly shaken. He told the villagers, "This thing thinks like a man." The attacks intensified. The hyena began killing every other night. It wasn't just hungry, it seemed to be stockpiling. The villagers of Demoux stopped sleeping. They spent the nights huddled around massive bonfires in the center of the village, beating drums and shouting to keep the darkness at bay. But the devil was patient. It would wait for the fires to die down, for the exhaustion to set in. By November, the death toll stood at 35. The ravine had become a graveyard. Burton realized he couldn't outsmart the beast with conventional tactics. He needed to track it to its lair. He needed to find where it slept during the day. This was a suicide mission. Hyenas live in deep, labyrinthian caves. Going into such a cave, crawling on your belly in the dark to face a bone-crushing monster is a special kind of madness. But Burton had no choice. He hired 2 local trackers, Bola and Chand, men who knew the ravine better than they knew their own wives. They found the trail near a dry riverbed, faint prints leading up a steep, crumbling slope towards a cluster of ancient caves known as the Black Mouths. The smell hit them first. 50 yards from the entrance, the stench of death was overpowering. It was a mix of rotting meat and the distinctive musky odor of a hyena's den. They climbed slowly, rifles ready. The entrance to the main cave was a dark slit in the rock, barely 3 feet high. Flies buzzed in thick black clouds. Bones were scattered everywhere, skulls of dogs, femurs of cattle, and chillingly, the small, delicate bones of children. Burton looked at Bola. The tracker's face was gray with fear, but he nodded. They were going in. Burton tied a handkerchief over his nose and lit a torch. He went first, crawling on his hands and knees, dragging the heavy express rifle. The tunnel was tight and suffocating. The air was hot and thick. Every shadow looked like a monster. After 20 feet, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber. Burton shone the torch around. The walls were slick with moisture. In the corner, on a bed of dry grass and old bones, lay a pile of fresh kills. But the beast was not there. Burton felt a cold shiver run down his spine. If the beast wasn't in the den during the day, where was it? Suddenly, a shout echoed from outside. "Sahib! Sahib! Behind you!" It was Chand, the tracker who had stayed at the entrance. Burton scrambled backward, scraping his elbows, panic rising in his throat. He burst out of the cave into the blinding sunlight just in time to see a blur of gray fur exploding from a hidden upper fissure in the rock face. The hyena had a back door. It had been watching them crawl in, waiting to trap them. The beast didn't attack Burton. It charged straight for Chand. The tracker fired his old musket, a cloud of black smoke obscuring the view. Bang! When the smoke cleared, Chand was on his back, screaming, his arm mangled. The hyena had taken the shot, mauled the man, and vanished over the ridge in seconds. It was a disaster. The hunter had become the hunted once again. They were not dealing with an animal. They were dealing with a tactician. Chand, the tracker, survived, but his arm was a ruin of torn flesh and crushed bone. The journey back to the village was a somber funeral march. They had gone to kill a devil, and they had returned defeated, carrying their own wounded. But amidst the blood on the rocks, Burton noticed something that gave him a glimmer of hope. There were drops of dark, almost black blood mixed with the dust. The musket ball had hit the beast. A wounded animal usually retreats. It goes into the deepest hole it can find to heal or die. But Burton knew, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that the Damo devil was not a normal animal. Pain would not make it fearful, it would make it vindictive. That night, the atmosphere in the village was suffocating. The villagers barricaded themselves inside the temple, the only stone structure in the area. They believed the stone walls were their only salvation. Burton sat on the temple steps, his express rifle across his knees, a bottle of whiskey by his side to steady his shaking hands. He was waiting for the retaliation. It began at 2 a.m. It didn't start with an attack. It started with the sound. From the darkness of the surrounding scrubland, the laughter began. He 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 he. But this time it wasn't coming from one spot. It seemed to be moving, circling the temple. First from the north, then the east, then the south. The beast was running laps around their fortress, taunting them. The sound was so unnatural, so manic, that the women inside the temple began to wail, drowning out the prayers of the priest. Then the laughter stopped abruptly. Thump! Something heavy hit the heavy wooden doors of the temple. The villagers screamed. Thump! It hit again. The beast was throwing its entire body weight against the wood. It knew the people were inside. It could smell them. It was a siege. Burton stood up, aiming his rifle at the door. He could hear the wood splintering, groaning under the assault of the monster outside. The sheer power required to batter down a temple door was unfathomable for a hyena. Suddenly, the banging stopped. Silence returned. Burton didn't lower his gun. He walked slowly towards the door, listening. He heard a scratching sound, not at the door, but above him. He looked up. The temple had a small ventilation window, high up on the wall, about 10 feet off the ground. It was small, barely wide enough for a man's head. A face appeared in the window. It was the beast. It had scrambled up the rough stone wall like a lizard. Its massive head was jammed into the small opening, its jaws snapping, saliva dripping down onto the floor below. Its eyes were locked on the huddled mass of people. It was trying to squeeze through. Burton didn't hesitate. He raised the 5.77 Express and fired. The boom was deafening in the enclosed space. The muzzle flash illuminated the room like lightning. The bullet smashed into the stone frame of the window, sending shards of rock flying. The hyena let out a shriek, a sound of frustration, not pain, and dropped back down to the ground outside. Burton ran to the window and looked out. He saw the gray shape limping away into the night, dragging a back leg. He had missed the kill shot, but the stone shrapnel had done damage. The siege was broken. But as the sun rose, they realized the cost of the night. The beast hadn't just attacked the temple. On its way out, in a fit of rage, it had slaughtered every single goat and cow in the outer pens. It didn't eat them, it just killed them. Hundreds of carcasses lay in the dust. It was a message. If I cannot have you, I will destroy everything you have. The final showdown was inevitable. The sun rose on a village that looked like a slaughterhouse. The dust was turned to mud by the blood of hundreds of livestock. But Captain Burton did not look at the dead goats. He looked at the ground. There, leading away from the temple wall, was a trail of blood, thick, dark, and consistent. The blood was bleeding heavily from the shrapnel wound. The laughing devil was mortal after all. Burton knew this was the endgame. A wounded predator is a ticking bomb. It would not hunt tonight. It would be in pain, feverish, and desperate for water. He grabbed his rifle, but this time he didn't take the trackers. He didn't want anyone else to die. He filled his canteen, checked his ammunition, 2 in the chamber, 2 in his pocket, and followed the trail alone into the heat of the day. The blood led him away from the caves, down into the deepest, narrowest part of the ravine known as Kali Ghati, Black Valley. It was a place where the sun rarely touched the ground, a claustrophobic crack in the earth filled with sharp boulders and silence. The air was still. Burton walked for 3 hours, his eyes scanning every rock, every shadow. The trail was getting fresher, the blood was still wet. Around noon, he reached a dead end. The ravine ended in a sheer rock wall, at the base of which lay a small, stagnant pool of green water. And there, lying by the water, was the devil. It was lying on its side, panting. Its massive chest was heaving. One hind leg was shattered, useless. But as Burton stepped over the last ridge, a pebble skittered under his boot. Click. The sound was tiny, but in that canyon, it was like a gong. The hyena stopped panting. It slowly raised its head. For the first time, Burton saw the monster in full daylight. It was hideous. Its fur was patchy and covered in mange, its skin scarred from 100 battles. Its left ear was missing. But it was the size that made Burton's breath catch in his throat. It was huge, a freak of nature, fueled by a diet of human flesh. The beast stood up. It didn't try to run. It knew it was cornered. It looked at the rock wall, then back at Burton. The laughter was gone. A deep, guttural growl started in its chest, vibrating through the canyon floor. It lowered its head, ears flattened against its skull. It was going to charge. Burton raised the heavy 5.77 Express. His hands were sweating. The distance was 40 yards. "Come on," Burton whispered. "Come on, you devil." The beast launched itself. Even on 3 legs, it was terrifyingly fast. It moved in a zigzag pattern, a gray blur of muscle and teeth closing the distance. 30 yards, 20. Burton fired the first barrel. Boom! The bullet hit the beast in the chest. The impact lifted the hyena off the ground and slammed it backward into the dust. Burton lowered the gun, exhaling. It was over. But then, the dust swirled. The beast rose. It was coughing blood, its chest destroyed, but its eyes were fixed on Burton with a hatred that defied biology. It wasn't running on muscle anymore. It was running on pure adrenaline and rage. It let out a scream, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob, and charged again. Burton's eyes went wide. He had 1 bullet left. The beast was 10 yards away. He could smell its rotten breath. He could see the yellow tartar on its teeth. If he missed, he was dead. He waited. He didn't aim for the chest. He aimed for the open mouth. 5 yards. The beast leaped, jaws wide open to crush Burton's skull. Burton pulled the trigger. Boom! The second shot caught the beast in midair. The force of the heavy caliber bullet at point-blank range was devastating. The creature was thrown backward as if hit by a train, crashing into the stagnant pool of water. It thrashed once, sending green slime flying, and then silence. Burton stood there, his ears ringing, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He walked slowly to the edge of the water. The king of the ravine, the child eater, the laughing devil, lay floating in the scum. The water turned red. It was finally truly dead. But as Burton stared at the carcass, he felt no triumph, only a cold chill, because he noticed something on the beast's neck, a faint worn mark in the fur, a ring, as if a long time ago it had worn a collar. Captain Burton knelt in the mud, staring at that faint white scar encircling the beast's neck. The realization hit him harder than the recoil of his rifle. This was not a demon sent by the gods. It was not a wild spirit of the ravine. The laughing devil had once been someone's pet. It explained everything. It explained why the beast had no fear of fire. It explained why it knew how to open latches. It explained why it wasn't afraid of the scent of humans, because it had been raised by them. Perhaps it was the discarded exotic pet of a wealthy landlord or an eccentric British officer, fed by hand until it grew too big, too dangerous, and was cast out into the wild. We created our own executioner. We took a wild thing, stripped it of its natural fear, and then abandoned it to hunger. Burton did not take the skin as a trophy. He did not mount the head on his wall. He tied a rope around the legs and dragged the carcass back to the village. When the villagers saw the dead monster, there was no celebration. There was a somber, heavy silence. They built a massive pyre of wood and threw the beast onto it. As the flames consumed the body, the people watched with cold, hard eyes. They weren't just burning an animal, they were burning a memory. They wanted to erase the existence of the thing that had taken their children. The Damo Devil is now a forgotten footnote in the archives of British India. But if you go to the region today, the locals still have a peculiar relationship with the night. They do not keep dogs, they do not sleep with their windows open, and if you ask them about the hyena, they will tell you that the spirit did not die in the fire. They believe that the laughter still echoes in the ravines of Kaligati when the moon is full. This case serves as a grim reminder. Nature is dangerous, but nature corrupted by man is terrifying. The hyena was just an animal trying to survive. It was our influence that turned it into a devil. This brings us to the end of the saga of the Laughing Devil. If this story sent a shiver down your spine, hit that like button. It helps us feed the algorithm. Share this video with someone who thinks hyenas are just cowardly scavengers, and make sure you are subscribed to Apex Truth with notifications turned on. We dig up the nightmares that history tries to forget. I'm your host, signing off. Sleep well, lock your doors, and if you hear laughter in the dark, don't go looking for the joke.